before the steel towers, the constant hum of traffic, and the neon glow of Times Square, the land we now know as New York City was a very different place. Thousands of years ago, long before European sails dotted the horizon, this region was home to rich forests, tidal wetlands, and abundant wildlife. The Lenape people, an Algonquian-speaking indigenous nation, thrived here for centuries. The Lenape called the area Lenape-Hoking, the land of the Lenape. This territory stretched across present-day New Jersey, eastern Pennsylvania, southeastern New York, and parts of Delaware. The specific area of Manhattan was known as Mannahatta, a Lenape word often translated as Island of Many Hills. Archaeological evidence shows that the Lenape had lived in the region for thousands of years, hunting deer and elk, fishing in the Hudson and East Rivers, and growing crops such as corn, beans, and squash. Their society was organized around kinship and seasonal migration patterns. In the warm months, families would gather along rivers and bays to fish, collect shellfish, and trade. In colder months, they moved inland for hunting. This seasonal cycle not only sustained them, but preserved the natural resources for future generations. The Lenape were also skilled traders. They were part of a vast network of exchange that stretched far beyond the borders of their homeland. Shell beads, known as wampum, crafted from the purple and white of quahog clamshells, served as a form of currency and ceremonial exchange. These beads were highly valued across indigenous North America. Spiritually, the Lenape lived in deep connection with the land. They believed that all living things, from the deer in the forest to the fish in the river, possessed a spirit. This worldview shaped how they hunted, fished, and gathered, ensuring they took only what they needed. By the early 1600s, when Europeans first arrived, the Lenape population in the broader region may have been around 15,000 to 20,000, with several hundred living on the island of Manhattan itself. It is important to note that the Lenape's world was already changing before they ever saw Europeans. The arrival of coastal traders, disease from earlier contact with Europeans in other regions, and shifting alliances between native nations meant that this was a dynamic, politically complex world, not a static wilderness. When Henry Hudson's ship sailed into New York Harbor in 1609, the Lenape could not have foreseen how profoundly this encounter would alter their homeland. The rivers they fished, the forests they hunted, and the land they farmed would soon become the foundation of a city that would grow into one of the most influential in the world. The 19th century ushered in a period of extraordinary change for New York City. What had once been a modest port town now exploded into an industrial and commercial giant, rapidly becoming the largest city in the United States. The transformative catalyst was the opening of the Erie Canal in 1825. Stretching 363 miles from the Hudson River to Lake Erie, the canal revolutionized trade by linking the Atlantic seaboard to the fertile interior of the country. Suddenly, New York was the gateway for agricultural products, raw materials, and manufactured goods flowing east and west. The city's port thrived, attracting merchants and entrepreneurs who saw limitless opportunity. The promise of work drew waves of immigrants who reshaped the city's demographic and cultural landscape. The earliest major influx came from Ireland during the devastating Great Famine of the 1840s. Thousands fled starvation and oppression, arriving in New York's harbor destitute but hopeful. They took jobs in construction, factories, and domestic service, enduring harsh conditions but establishing vibrant communities. Following the Irish were German immigrants fleeing political unrest and poverty. Many brought skills as craftsmen, brewers, and merchants, enriching the city's economic fabric. Later in the century, a more diverse wave arrived. Italians, Jews from Eastern Europe, Poles, Russians, Greeks, and others settled in dense neighborhoods, especially in the Lower East Side. Tenement housing, cramped and often squalid, became the norm for many working-class families. But these communities formed the bedrock of New York's identity as a city of immigrants. By 1900, the city's population had soared to over 3.4 million, nearly a third of the entire US urban population. This staggering growth brought challenges: poverty, overcrowding, disease, and political corruption. The notorious Tammany Hall political machine wielded enormous influence by exchanging favours and services for immigrant votes, sometimes at the expense of honest governance. Yet amid hardship, New York flourished. The city undertook ambitious infrastructure projects. The construction of the Brooklyn Bridge, completed in 1883, linked Manhattan and Brooklyn, symbolizing progress and ingenuity. Public parks like Central Park, designed by Frederick Law Olmsted and Calvert Vaux, offered urban green space to millions. The early skyscrapers began to shape the skyline, reflecting the city's boundless ambition. New York in the 19th century was a city of extremes: wealth and poverty, opportunity and struggle, hope and hardship, a microcosm of the American experiment itself. The turn of the century saw New York City reach unprecedented heights of wealth, culture, and complexity. Officially unified in 1898 as the 5 boroughs, New York was the beating heart of America's economic and cultural dynamism. The skyline soared with the arrival of monumental skyscrapers like the Woolworth Building and the iconic Flatiron Building. The subway system, inaugurated in 1904, transformed urban mobility, knitting the boroughs closer together and expanding residential options for workers. New York's diversity deepened, fueled by continued immigration through Ellis Island. Italians, Eastern European Jews, Greeks, and others forged tight-knit enclaves, establishing vibrant neighborhoods rich with cultural traditions. The city became a melting pot on a massive scale. Culturally, the city blossomed. The Harlem Renaissance of the 1920s celebrated African-American art, literature, and music. Broadway flourished with theatrical productions that would become classics. Museums and libraries expanded, establishing New York as a global cultural capital. But the prosperity of the Roaring Twenties came crashing down with the Great Depression. Unemployment soared, poverty deepened, and the city struggled to care for its needy. Under Mayor Fiorello LaGuardia, New York embarked on public works projects that provided jobs and infrastructure, including bridges, airports, and parks. World War II brought renewed economic vigour. New York's ports, factories, and financial institutions became essential to the war effort, reinforcing the city's vital role on the world stage. The post-war decades saw New York at the pinnacle of American influence. The baby boom expanded the population, while suburban growth transformed the metropolitan region. The city welcomed immigrants from Latin America, the Caribbean, and Asia, further enriching its cultural fabric. Economically, Wall Street dominated global finance, and media industries flourished. The United Nations headquarters was established in Manhattan, cementing New York's role as a hub of international diplomacy. Yet beneath the surface, problems brewed. Racial tensions, housing shortages, and urban decay challenged the city's stability. The 1960s and 1970s brought rising crime, fiscal crisis, and social unrest. New York teetered on the brink of bankruptcy in the mid-1970s. Despite these hardships, the city's cultural scene thrived with the rise of punk rock, hip-hop, and avant-garde art. Immigrant neighborhoods continued to renew the city's vibrancy. Late 20th century decline and renewal, 1980 to 2000. The 1980s were a decade of contrasts. While Wall Street flourished in the age of deregulation, many neighborhoods grappled with crime and poverty. The rise of hip-hop and street art brought new cultural expression, even as the city fought to reduce crime and improve public safety. In the 1990s, under leadership like Mayor Rudy Giuliani's, New York underwent a major transformation. Crime rates plummeted, tourism surged, and the economy diversified. Broadway and the arts thrived, and the city reasserted its status as a global cultural and financial powerhouse. The population rose to over 8 million, and the city continued to welcome immigrants from around the world. 9/11, the Age of Resilience, 2001 to 2010. The terrorist attacks of September 11, 2001 devastated New York. The destruction of the World Trade Center and loss of nearly 3,000 lives was a defining tragedy for the city and the nation. Yet the response showcased the city's resilience. Recovery efforts, memorial construction, and rebuilding initiatives galvanized New Yorkers and the world. The One World Trade Center rose as a symbol of hope and renewal. The decade also included economic challenges like the 2008 financial crisis, but New York adapted, embracing new industries and maintaining its role as a cultural and financial centre. 21st century New York, global city, 10 present. In recent years, New York has solidified its position as a global capital of finance, culture, innovation, and diversity. Technology sectors have expanded, neighbourhoods have revitalised, and the city continues to attract immigrants from every continent. Challenges remain: affordable housing, social inequality, climate change, and public health crises like the COVID-19 pandemic tested the city's limits. But through it all, New York's spirit endures. With a population of approximately 8.5 million, representing over 180 nationalities and speaking more than 200 languages, New York remains a vibrant, dynamic metropolis. Its history, a story of transformation, resilience,